Then would like to call the May 26, 2021 Diversion Authority Finance Committee meeting to order. Roll call, please.
Dr. Mahoney.
Here.
Mr. Peterson.
I'm here.
Mr. Jacobson.
Here.
Mr. Costin. Mr. Costin? He did indicate that he was going to. Oh, okay, thank you. Ms. Johnson. Mr. Brown Pleasure.
Here.
Mr. Redlinger.
Here.
Mr. Steen.
Here.
Mr. Pepcorn.
Here.
And Mr. Reeds.
Here.
We have a quorum.
All right. Well, thank
Hi,
you,
Don. This is Kent Costin. I'm calling by phone. I was having problems with my Teams program.
Yep, I did hear you check in, Kent. I have you down. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thanks, Kent. With that, we've all had a chance to review the minutes and looking for a motion to approve the minutes or any questions. Hello?
Peterson motion.
Jacobson to approve.
Peterson second.
A motion and a second. Any discussion on the motion? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion passes. Next item, approval of the order of the agenda. Any questions or motion to approve?
Move to approve Costin.
Is there a second?
Second, Montplaisir.
Been moved and seconded. Any discussion? All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Thank you. Motion passes. Approval of the bills. Kent, I'm hoping you have your information in front of you.
Yeah, I believe I do. The total amount of bills for the month of May is $5,792,093.74. Familiar vendors, as in the past. The only new vendor is the Bank of North Dakota, which is serving as trustee under an agreement that will be related to the WIFIA program. John might talk about that later. So other than that, nothing remarkable.
Any questions for Kent on the bills? Or a motion to approve?
Move to approve, Montplaisir.
Is there a second?
Second.
Second. Thank you. We have a motion and a second. Any discussion on the motion? Go
Can I
ahead.
please get a repeat on the second?
Could be Mahoney, could be somebody else. It's mysterious.
Yeah, had several people at the same time here. So Mahoney, thank you.
I'll take credit for it because I'm one of those finance guys out of the way. You compare them on pleasure and costume all the time.
Okay, we'll give it to you this time.
Thank you, Mayor Mahoney. With that, any discussion? If none, looking for a motion.
We moved and seconded.
Oh, I'm sorry. With that, roll call, please.
Dr. Mahoney,
Aye.
Mr. Peterson,
Yes.
Mr. Jacobson,
Yes.
Mr. Costin,
Yes.
Mr. Montplaisir,
Yes.
Mr. Redlinger,
Yes.
Mr. Steen,
Yes.
Mr. Pepcorn,
Aye.
Mr. Reeds.
Yes.
That is everyone.
Motion
This
passes.
is Lori Johnson. I'm actually on the call now.
Thank you, Lori.
Thank you.
And next up would be the financial report. Kent.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I will be reporting on pages 19 and 20 of the financial report as presented in your packet. The total spend for 2021 year-to-date, $16,963,781, of which almost $12 million is for land acquisitions. And total life-to-date project, $662,971,122. Go on to page 20. the net position for the program as of the end of April was 106,388,832. And that'd be about the extent of my report. I did comment at the last meeting that we believe that the audit would be completed perhaps by this meeting. It's in its final stages of review with Eide Bailey, so that'll be deferred until June.
Thanks, Kent. Any questions for Kent on the financial report? Or motion to accept?
Jacobson to approve.
Is there a second?
Montplaisir, second.
We've got a motion and a second. Any discussion on the motion? If not, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, sign. Motion carries. Moving on to the Executive Director Financial Report, and I believe, Martin, you're sitting in for Joel. If I'm wrong, that's fine too.
I believe that's correct, unless Joel has joined. In front of you is the overall status level 1 summary, summarizing the estimate complete, overall cost to date, our annual budget, and the fiscal year cost to date through April 30th of 2021, showing a total expenditure of approximately to date of $32.83 million this year, overall cost to date, including outstanding accounts payable of $662,970,000. If we go to the level 2 detail, that provides additional detail in your packet for the line items that are at level 1. Won't take the time to review any of the particular line items, and here to answer any questions if you have them on level 1 or level 2.
Any questions for Martin? Anything more, Martin?
I don't believe at this time you're going to straight to contracting actions.
All right.
There is one executive director contracting recommendation in the packet. That is task order 32, amendment 0. It is for services during construction for the I-29 road grade raise. This is a contract to HMG. They were the designers for the Corps on that project and have submitted a task order to provide field services during construction. That task order has been through the executive director and PMC process, and there is in your packet a contracting recommendation executed by Joel in the amount of the $487,899 even. So the requested action of the Finance Committee is to approve this and carry it forward as a recommendation to the board for execution tomorrow.
Any questions for Martin? I just have one. I was a little surprised, Martin, to see this is a 4-year project.
Yes.
Wow.
It.
How many miles of road raise?
Good question, Paul. I was going to count on Paul for my phone a friend guy for specific answer.
It's between 4 and 5 miles. So
Right.
pretty
I think,
significant amount of construction. I believe the cost was was around the 60+ million range.
yes. I think one of the other challenges with this is that since it does require a fairly significant bypass of the freeway to be constructed, then coordination of borrow. You'll recall this project coordinated borrow between the Red River Control Site and here. So the length of construction is probably extended from what you might normally see for a 4-mile freeway project.
Okay, thank you. Any additional questions for Martin? If there are none, then we will need a motion to approve.
Mahoney, motion to approve.
Is there a second?
Peterson, second.
I have a motion and a second. Any discussion on the motion? Hearing none, roll call, please.
Dr. Mahoney,
Aye.
Mr. Peterson,
Yes.
Mr. Jacobson,
Yes.
Mr. Costin,
Yes.
Ms. Johnson,
Yes.
Mr. Montplaisir,
Yes.
Mr. Redlinger,
Yes.
Mr. Steen,
Yes.
Mr. Pepcorn,
Aye.
and Mr. Reeds.
Aye.
That is it.
Thank you. Motion passes. With that, we move on to the John Shockley Show. We've got a fair number of actionable items coming up here, and John, as we get through these, I think we're looking at action after each item until we get the MOUs on the road crossings, which we'll approve all at once.
That is correct.
Okay.
That is correct. Mr. Chair, thank you. And I have a number of very large documents that are on the agenda, so I'm just briefly going to summarize each one. And if we could have the recommended motion to approve each one. The first item is the resolution authorizing the approval and execution and delivery of the Master Indenture of Trust. That is the document that ties all of the financing together for the authority, from the local financing to how the flow of funds at all levels work, including the different debt instruments. It is a comprehensive document. We've been working on it for close to 18 months, and we are at the finish line. And so we're asking the board to approve it. I can and we'd be looking for the Finance Committee to make a recommendation for approval. I can certainly answer any questions that you might have about the document, but it's really the base document for all of our financing.
Any questions for John? Or a motion to recommend approval?
Mahoney
Montplaisir
moved to approve.
approve.
I've got Mike making the motion, and second was anybody? Is there a second?
Reed's second.
Thank you. I have a motion and a second.
I
Any
have a
discussion on?
Question for
Yep.
John. It's Rick,
Yep. Go
page
ahead.
73 out of the 850, which it says the sales tax revenue bond shall be obligations to the authority payable solely from the net pledge revenues. Does that mean the county and the city, basically, you're getting the ability to do this with our pledge? It can only be
Yes.
used for the VDA, basically?
Yeah, so what happens is under the pledge resolutions and the Master Indenture of Trust, the city and the county pledge their sales taxes to the revenue fund that is held by the authority or held by the trustee. In the event that we issue sales tax revenue bonds pursuant to the Master Indenture of Trust, those sales tax bonds would not be debt obligations of the city or the county. They would be obligations of the authority. Currently, we're not contemplating the issuance of sales tax bonds, but because this is a 40 to 50-year deal, I wanted to have the maximum flexibility for the authority to use different debt instruments in the future. So it is possible for the authority to issue sales tax bonds, but once again, they wouldn't be obligations of the county or the city, they'd be obligations of the authority.
So if Ken Costin reported on bond indebtedness or our balance sheet, this would not show up on that, John? The DA could maybe have it, but it wouldn't show up as our debt obligation?
That's correct.
Thank you.
Any other questions for John? Oh. All right, I think we have a second or a motion and a second. No other questions. Roll call, please.
Dr. Mahoney,
Aye.
Mr. Peterson,
Yes.
Mr. Jacobson,
Yes.
Mr. Costin,
Yes.
Mrs. Johnson,
Yes.
Mr. Montplaisir,
Yes.
Mr. Redlinger,
Yes.
Mr. Steen,
Yes.
Mr. Pepcorn,
Aye.
Mr. Reeds.
Yes.
That is everyone.
All right, motion passes. On to 8B.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. 8B is a resolution consenting to the Cass County Joint Water Resource District issuing temporary refunding improvement bonds. The Cass County and the city of Fargo took out 2 loans with Wells Fargo to provide temporary financing for the project. Those 2 loans are liens against the sales taxes, and as a condition to the WIFIA loan disbursements, we had to pay off the Wells Fargo loans, and also to clean up our lien structure for financing, we needed to pay them off. Pursuant to that financing plan, Cass County Joint Water Resource District is issuing temporary refunding improvement bonds, the proceeds of which will be used to pay off the Wells Fargo loans that have been issued to the city of Fargo and this Cass County. Those loans combined are about $152 million. The loans will be paid off on July 1st. I just before today's meeting, I got confirmation from Wells Fargo on the payoff date. We intend to have the Cass County Joint Board issue its refunding improvement bonds. They'll be authorizing them tomorrow, and then they'll close on them at the end of June, and the proceeds of those bonds will be used to pay off the Wells Fargo credit facilities. The trustee would hold the funds from those bonds, and then on the payoff date for the Wells Fargo loans, we'll pay them off. And so that will be it's always been contemplated as part of our financial plan. As under the joint powers agreement when one of the member entities issues debt for the project, the authority has to consent to it. That's why the authority's consent is needed for this debt issuance.
Mayor Mahoney, I see you have a question.
And John, why is it that with the bond we got from the state, we wouldn't just pay off the Wells Fargo debt? Why do you take a bond to pay that off? And what is the rate of that bond the county's taking?
Well, great question. So the first issue is that we need to close on the WIFIA loan. And in order to close on the WIFIA loan, we have to have funds to pay off the Wells Fargo loans. We don't have sufficient funds on hand right now from the state, the $435 million, to pay off the Wells Fargo loans. So Cass County is issuing temporary refunding improvement bonds to pay off the Wells Fargo credit facility. Within those bonds, we have designed a 1-year call feature. So if the state is on time in getting us funds, we have the option to pay off those temporary refunding improvement bonds early through the joint board. So it's a matter of timing in order to satisfy a condition precedent of the WIFIA loan. The interest rate on the temporary refunding improvement bonds, just like with any bond sale, we won't know till the day of the sale. We've been seeing numbers well under 1%, but once again, we won't know until the exact day of the sale, which is anticipated to happen the second week in June. But it should be under 1%, and it is with a call feature so that when state of North Dakota dollars come in, we have that option under the financial plan to prepay the temporary funding.
Very good. Thanks, John. Appreciate it.
No problem.
Thank you. Any additional questions for John? Or a motion to recommend approval of this resolution?
I'd move it forward, especially when the county's taking on the debt.
You're part of that, Mayor. So,
Second, Costin.
all right, I have a motion. Is there a second?
Second, Costin.
I have a motion and a second. Any discussion on the motion? Hearing none, roll call, please.
Dr. Mahoney,
Aye.
Mr. Peterson,
Yes.
Mr. Jacobson,
Yes.
Mr. Costin,
Yes.
Ms. Johnson,
Yes.
Mr. Montplaisir,
Yes.
Mr. Redlinger,
Yes.
Mr. Steen,
Yes.
Mr. Pepcorn,
Aye.
Mr. Reeds.
Aye.
That is everyone.
Motion passes. With that, moving on to 8C, resolution approving the WIFIA loan agreement. John?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And this is the culmination of the year and a half of work. This resolution authorizes the diversion authority, consistent with the master indenture of trust, to enter into the loan agreement with United States Environmental Protection Agency, WIFIA, for a loan in the amount of $569 million plus capitalized interest. You'll recall from our previous discussions, the interest rate on this loan is 1 basis point above the U.S. Treasury rate, and the term on it is in total about 45 years. During the first 5 to 6 years, it's a drawdown loan, and the diversion authority does not pay any debt service during the drawdown period. So it is nice for construction period financing. And then after the project is substantially complete, which is estimated to occur in either 2027 or 2028, we have a 5-year deferral period after that. So the first payment, debt service payment, isn't due till 2033. And after that, it is a 35-year repayment. So it's quite a lengthy repayment term, and at interest rates that the private bond market cannot compete with, because it's only 1 basis point above what a treasury rate would be, which is virtually nothing. So it's been a lot of work, but we are here. We are tentatively set to close on the WIFIA loan on June 18th of this year.
Thank you, John. Any questions for John?
John, this is Kent. I did have a question with regard to the structure of the deal. If there's a 5-year deferral of payments after the construction period, does the U.S. EPA fund the interest, or is the interest capitalized and then paid by the diversion over the term?
The EPA funds the capitalized interest.
That's awesome.
You can, it has flexible terms. So which is a great, in our finance plan, we've tried to give the authority as many options as possible. So if you're knocking it out of the park, so to speak, with sales tax receipts, the authority does have the option to decide that, well, we want to go ahead and start paying some principal or interest or capitalized interest. So we have a tremendous amount of flexibility to make that decision. I didn't want to lock the authority into having to make debt service payments during that time period until we really knew how the sales tax was performing. And during that 5-year deferral period, since the interest rate is so low on this obligation, our financial plan contemplates that we would pay the higher interest rate obligations first, sort of get the most effective use out of your debt repayment by paying higher interest obligations first, and then have the WIFIA loan paid last because the interest is so much lower on the WIFIA loan. But great question.
Thank you.
Mayor Mahoney, did you have a question? Your hand was still up.
I'm sorry, I didn't take my hand down, but I'd move to approve when you get to that point.
I think we may be there, so I will take that as a motion. Is there a second?
Jacobson, second.
I have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none, roll call, please.
Dr. Mahoney,
Yes, fantastic.
Mr. Peterson,
Yes, and ditto what the mayor said.
Mr. Jacobson,
Yes.
Mr. Costin, Mr. Costin, Ms. Johnson,
Yes.
Mr. Montplaisir,
Yes.
Mr. Redlinger,
Yes.
Mr. Steen,
Yes.
Mr. Peppercorn,
Aye.
Mr. Reeds.
Aye.
That is everyone. We must have, Kent must have fallen off again.
Moorhead Internet.
I'm still here. Can you hear me?
Hear you now. Yeah, you were called and did not hear a response, Ken, so yay or nay?
I voted yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Motion passes. Way to go, John. I know your team and you yourself have worked long and hard on this, and really, just one member, just really appreciate it, all the time you guys and effort to put time and effort you guys have put into this deal. So it's fantastic.
Thank you.
8D.
Mr. Chair, this is for the fiscal agent fee approval. Under the Master Indenture of Trust, we really have a segregation of duties between the trustee, the Bank of North Dakota. The trustee performs the what I would term the service on all of the debt payments, along with payments of bonds, serves as paying agent, trustee for holding different documents, also takes care of wires on payoffs and redemptions. It also helps to pay the availability payments that are due under the project agreement. The Bank of North Dakota, given that the Master Indenture of Trust is such a lengthy document, both in terms of years and in the requirements for the trustee, normally a trustee would charge for every single transaction. They would charge a paying agent fee that might be a couple $100, a wire fee, those sorts of smaller fees. And so the Bank of North Dakota decided that it would simply charge a flat monthly fee as the best use of dollars for the authority, because the Bank of North Dakota is a good partner. What I can tell you from the trustee standpoint is that, having worked with many private trustees, they would charge far more. I have one bond transaction for an arena that just has 2 series of bonds, and they're charging just about $3,000 a month for just 2 series of bonds. As you've seen in the Master Indenture of Trust, there could be 10 to 15 series of bonds at any one given time, plus the AP payments. So the trustees' fees are at $16,000 a month. Similarly, the fiscal agent has significant responsibilities, especially during the construction period. So commencing on the effective date of the Master Indenture of Trust, which is June 10th, through that construction period end date of about 2028, they have to be responsible for payment and maintaining multiple funds on behalf of the authority, and different types of submissions and handling of dollars in compliance with both the IRS regulations, EPA regulations, and potentially SRF regulations. And so, as we discussed what the fee for Fargo should be, and I'm in agreement with this, we felt that during the construction period, it should match the trustee's fee. We did build into the proposed fiscal agent fee that after construction, we would renegotiate that fee, because after construction, there will be far less duties for the fiscal agent. And just as a aside, you might, during construction, you might be using 2 full-time equivalent people per month to handle fiscal agent duties, where after the construction is over, it might be 10 hours a month or 15 hours a month. And so we really wanted just to have an opportunity to reevaluate what that fee should look like. And I think that makes a lot of sense. And so we thought it would be appropriate to bring forward the recommendation for the fiscal agent fee of $16,000 per month. And I'm fully supportive and make the recommendation that it's a reasonable fee, given the amount of work that the fiscal agent will be responsible for, and the number of accounts, and frankly, the amount of money that the fiscal agent will be responsible for handling. Once the state issues its money to us for $435 million, the fiscal agent will have to manage those funds. And so they're managing significant amounts of money and have significant responsibilities. As the fiscal agent, they're a fiduciary under the trust agreement. And so they're potentially subject to the audit requirements and IRS requirements. I can certainly answer any questions that the Finance Committee may have, but I'm recommending this as a reasonable and appropriate fee for the fiscal agent during the construction period.
Mr. Mahoney.
Just curious, Rick, whether Pepcorn and myself and Costin have to abstain from this vote since it has to do with monetary issues with the city of Fargo. Do we abstain from it?
I'm going to defer to John on that.
Okay.
Well, I think there's, this is a recommendation coming from this group, so you're not obligating yourself. There wouldn't be a conflict. You can certainly abstain if you feel uncomfortable for making the recommendation. I think tomorrow before the board, the Fargo members probably will want to abstain from the vote because you would actually be making a decision there.
Thanks, John.
Thank you, John. With that, any other questions for John? If not, looking for a motion to approve the fiscal agent fee agreement.
Montplaisir would make the motion to approve.
Thank you. Is there
Peterson
a
second.
Peterson second. Any discussion on the motion? Hearing none, roll call, please.
Dr. Mahoney,
Abstain?
Mr. Peterson,
Yes.
Mr. Jacobson,
Yes.
Mr. Costin,
Abstain.
Ms. Johnson,
Yes.
Mr. Montplaisir,
Yes.
Mr. Redlinger,
Abstain.
Mr. Steen,
Yes.
Mr. Pepcorn,
Abstain.
Mr. Reeds.
Yes.
That is everyone.
Motion passes. Thank you, everybody. Now we move on to the approval of MOUs and agreements. And John, you are still on.
Yes,
There's four of these, and we'll take action after the fourth one.
right. Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I'll just briefly cover each one. This is a continuation of the third-party MOU contracting action. The good news is that we are starting to wind down on finalizing agreements for all of the MOUs on the channel. And just as a strategic decision, we decided that with the Southern Embankment, we would use a very similar method of negotiating out an MOU. We call them MURAs, which is for utility relocate agreements. And then as we need to relocate different utilities in the Southern Embankment for the core project, then we'll direct them to do it pursuant to that agreement so that it's more efficient and cost effective for the authority. So we have three agreements that would be with Mid-Continent Communications, Great River Energy, and Cass County Electric. And these are all for the Southern Embankment and associated infrastructure and utility relocates. There's currently not a obligation or amount assigned to these agreements because each of those comes through with the task order. The reason that we're using task orders for the Southern Embankment is that as the Corps finalizes designs for each of the reaches, that is then when we know which utilities have to be relocated. So it'd be very difficult right now for all parties involved to estimate the specific amount of the utility relocate. Once again, the nice part about these agreements is that there is an agreement already set in place, and then the authorities, engineers can just go ahead and tell the utility pursuant to task order to go ahead and relocate. I thought that this would be more efficient than having to draft an agreement each time. It's also more cost effective from a legal fee standpoint for the authority, not having multiple agreements. And I think we had one additional item. Is that? Yeah. So this is an MOU for the diversion channel and associated infrastructure, the diversion channel. This is a third-party MOU. These are the ones that we're starting to wind down, and that is between CenturyLink and the Diversion Authority. And that's so that the P3 developer, the authority, and the utility can coordinate the utility relocations underneath the channel. under all of these third-party MOUs, once we have a developer on board, the developer will really be responsible for implementing these third-party MOUs. They essentially stand in the shoes of the authority and undertake their utility relocation. These specify the technical requirements of the relocation. The costs associated with these will be included in the price of the P3 bid. So any of the utility relocations, this essentially sets forth the recipe, if you will, for relocating it, and then the developer steps in and relocates the utility. Can certainly answer any questions that the board might have.
Any questions for John?
Mahoney, move to approve.
The motion, is there a second?
Monplaisir, second.
Motion is second. Any discussion on the motion? Hearing none, roll call, please.
Dr. Mahoney,
Aye.
Mr. Peterson,
Yes.
Mr. Jacobson,
Yes.
Mr. Costin,
yes,
Ms. Johnson,
yes,
Mr. Montplaisir,
Yes.
Mr. Redlinger,
yes,
Mr. Steen,
Yes.
Mr. Pepcorn,
Aye.
Mr. Reeds.
Aye.
That is everyone.
Motion passes. Next item on the agenda, property acquisition. Mr. Dodds, are you available?
yes, sir, I'm here.
Thank you. Take it away.
Peggy, did you want to pull up the status report? So in your packet, you see the usual monthly status report. Scroll to page, yeah, there we go, perfect. Just a few things to point out on here. You know, we continue to track acquisitions. This map shows the overall status. A few things just worth sharing with you for this month. The number of parcels that are in the red category, acquired via last resort eminent domain, is shown as 90. That's actually a slight increase from last month, not because there's been new eminent domain actions, but because we actually had some parcels that have been split into multiple parts now. So the same number of actions as last month, but those parcels were split for purposes of construction of the Southern Embankment Reach 1. So I just wanted to point out that change. Those 90 parcels represent 28 distinct property owners. Otherwise, on this map, you can just see we continue to have a few acquisitions tick up every month. We're at 573 as of now. A couple purchase agreements that are signed and ready for closing. And then I guess we continue to be in negotiations for the Drain 27 wetland project, the Red River control structure, the Southern Embankment Reach 2A, and then a scattering of parcels in the upstream mitigation area. The orange blob is the upstream area where we're continuing to work on appraisals under the flowage easement valuation process. So that gives you a general highlight of where we're at. The next page, Peggy, if you can scroll to that, gives an overview of where we are with securing easements for the environmental monitoring program. This is part of the biotic and geomorphic monitoring. Since this report was produced a week or 10 days ago, we have had a number of these easements get signed. And so that 141 number has gone down a little bit, but it seems we've sort of secured most of the low-hanging fruit, and the negotiations on the remaining 100 plus of these easements have been more difficult. So we're going to keep working on it, but pretty soon we're going to have to make some more difficult decisions on those. And then the remainder of the report just drills into each section, into individual components. So happy to go through that, or happy to answer any questions if you have.
Any questions for Mr. Dodds? Any questions? Hearing none, thank you, Eric. Appreciate it.
You bet.
Next item on the agenda is the next meeting, unless there's any other business. Hearing none. June 23rd, and I think these will be starting to be in-person meetings now. Is that correct? The
I
city
don't
hall?
have confirmation on that 100% right now, but that's what we're kind of leaning for, Rick.
Okay. And I'm assuming, I think I heard Commissioner Sherling at the previous meeting talked about it would be nice if they're in person, they could still be made available on Teams. So I don't know where we're at with that either, but that would, I think that'd be great for people out of town, and as she indicated, so.
Yeah, if we're going to be in person, Teams will not be an option because we will have to use the system that goes through the chamber.
Oh, are
City
there
of
any
Fargo,
options?
Rick, City of Fargo could look at that because we're able to do our commission meetings and have people come and join us. So there might be a way we could do that in the chamber.
Okay. All right. Thanks, Mayor. Anything else? If not, item number 10, we are adjourned. Thank you.